Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's session. It's going to be a continuation of the last topic that I sent you. We're going to be talking about the placenta today, and you're going to notice that a few of the things that we mentioned last time are going to be repeated here today. So it's just going to be an extension of last time's topic. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so let's just look at what the placenta is, first of all. It is a maternal fetal organ, meaning that it has a part that is related to the mother and a part that is related to the fetus. And what it does is that it connects the developing fetus with the uterine wall via the umbilical cord. The thing to keep in mind is that it begins development at implantation. So as soon as implantation takes place or happens, that's when the placenta starts developing. It doesn't necessarily take on, obviously, its full structure until a certain period of time has passed, but it begins developing as soon as implantation takes place. And it is fully formed by the end of the 16th week, so roughly 4 months of development. The placenta is delivered after the fetus at birth. This is, of course, assuming that it is in the normal position. Okay. And this is just essentially a representation of where the placenta is in relation to the baby. So you can see the baby is in the uterine cavity. Okay, it's surrounded by the chorion and the amniotic sac, and then this is the cervix. It's closed off by this membrane here. And then you can see in the wall of the uterus how there's this red structure that kind of looks like a disc. This is the placenta. And you can see the blood vessels that are connected to the placenta kind of passing through this cord, which is the umbilical cord. Now, in terms of what the placenta does, it is important for nutrition, okay, in the sense that the mother's digested food and absorbed nutrients are obviously in her bloodstream. So, and we're going to see later on how the maternal blood communicates with the fetal blood. So through diffusion, the nutrients that the baby needs are going to pass from the maternal blood to the fetal blood. It's also important for gas exchange, similar idea, in the sense that the mother's oxygen is going to diffuse into the fetal blood, and the carbon dioxide that's produced from the metabolism in the fetus is going to be transferred to the maternal blood so that she can breathe it out. It's also important for waste removal. There are certain hormones that are produced by the placenta, and it's also important for immune support in the sense that its structure actually kind of acts like a barrier between the mother and the fetus, in the sense that it only allows certain things to pass through, so nutrients, gases, and things like that. But anything that is considered potentially harmful, especially if the mother's blood group is different from the baby's blood group, then the placenta kind of acts as a barrier to prevent any sort of antigenic reaction. And at the same time, it allows certain antibodies to pass from the mother to the fetus, and this helps with the immune system development of the baby. So, a full-term placenta obviously has to have a specific structure or certain features. And remember, a placenta is fully formed by the end of the 16th week or the 4th month. It is usually 22 centimeters long, 2 to 2.5 centimeters thick, and usually the central part of the placenta is thicker than the edges, so the edges are usually really thin. It weighs about 500 grams, and it usually has like a dark reddish blue color. And you have the umbilical cord connected to the placenta with 2 umbilical arteries, 1 umbilical vein, and usually the umbilical cord should measure 55 to 60 centimeters if it is normal. Okay, so like I said, these are the normal features that you should find in a full-term placenta. Okay? If any of these features are abnormal, then that usually means that there's a problem with the placenta, and that in turn means that it won't function properly, and then the things that the baby needs in terms of nutrients and gases and the things that need to be removed, all of those things are not going to happen normally. And so obviously there's going to be a problem with the development of the baby. Okay, and this is what the placenta looks like. So you've got the fetal side here on the left, and we say that this is the fetal side because obviously this is where the umbilical cord is connected. Okay, and then this is the maternal side where you can actually kind of see that it is divided into little segments that we're going to talk about later on. Okay, so in terms of parts, like I said earlier, the placenta is a maternal-fetal organ, which means that it has two parts, a fetal part, and the fetal part of the placenta is called the chorion, which we spoke about last time. And remember that it originates from the blastocyst. The maternal part of the placenta is called the decidua, and this develops from the uterine tissue. Okay, so let's look at the decidua first. The decidua is the modified mucosal lining of the uterus. Basically, it is the endometrium. And this forms in preparation for pregnancy. Now, if you guys remember with the session about the menstrual cycle and the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle, we actually touched on this, okay, where we spoke about the endometrium increasing in thickness and developing more layers. Okay, but now because it's relevant, we will let you know that this process is called decidualization. So an increase in thickness and increase in the number of layers of the endometrium is called decidualization. And as you guys remember, it occurs under the influence of progesterone. Now, the decidua itself is actually divided into a couple of parts. Okay, but there are two main parts that I want you guys to identify, okay? Now, if you look at this side here, okay, anything that's kind of in orange and related to the uterine wall, that is what we call the decidua, okay? Now, notice how you have a part of the decidua in the uterine wall that comes in close contact with this part of the chorion here. Remember, the chorion is the outer membrane of the developing fetus. Okay, so these are the villi that we spoke about last time. Okay, so notice how part of the decidua or part of the embryo endometrium is closely related to this part of the chorion. This is called the decidua basalis. Okay, now if you guys remember, implantation happened within the endometrial wall. Okay, which means that as the fetus or as the embryo is growing and projecting into the uterine cavity, a part of the endometrium is actually going to get extended along with it. So if you follow here, okay, this is where the decidua basalis kind of ends, and notice how part of the decidua actually covers the chorion on this side here. Okay, this is what we call the decidua capsularis. Okay, so the decidua itself is divided into two parts. The decidua basalis, which is the part of the endometrium that comes in contact with the trophoblast, and this is the part that ends up interacting with the chorion, like I showed you. And the decidua capsularis is the layer of the endometrium that grows over and covers the developing embryo. And it's usually on the luminal side of the endometrium, basically the side of the endometrium that is parallel to or on the side of the uterine cavity. In addition to its part in formation of the placenta, the decidua acts as a barrier from the maternal immune system, which is what we spoke about earlier. Because the decidua is a thickened layer, Okay, it's very difficult for any maternal antigens or antibodies, or antibodies that are not needed, okay, to cross into the fetal blood system. Okay, now we're just going to go over the chorion real quick, and this was mentioned in the last session, so you guys have a rough idea about it. Okay, so again, there are two parts that I need you guys to know, okay? One part of the chorion, like I said last time, this part is called the chorionic plate. And you notice how part of the chorionic plate actually has these extensions or tree-like projections coming out of it, which we referred to last time as the villi. Okay? The part of the chorion that has the villi extending out of it is called the chorion frondosum. Alright? The other part of the chorion, which I mentioned last time as just being the chorion, okay? Okay, the part that I said is smooth and has no villi coming out of it. The one that is found opposite to the developing embryo, this is called the chorion leaf. Alright, so the chorion is also divided into two parts. You have the chorion frondosum, which is the side of the chorionic plate that has the villi extending out of it and invading into the endometrium or decidua basalis. The chorion leaf is the part that lines the decidua capsularis and is found opposite to the developing fetus or embryo, depending on what stage of development we're in. And remember that the chorion leaf is smooth and it does not have any villi. So that's how you differentiate the two parts, okay? They differ in their position or what side they're found on, and they also differ in their presence or absence of villi. So if it's on the side of the endometrium and it does have villi, this is the chorion frondosum. If it's opposite or away from the endometrial lining, or away from on the opposite side of the fetus, and does not have any villi, then this is the chorion leaf. Now, with further development of the placenta, so even as it's completed its development after 4 months, it still has to develop a little bit more. So with advanced pregnancy, the chorion frondosum develops even more villi, and then becomes referred to as the bushy chorion. Okay, so just think of the bushy chorion as the same thing as the chorion frondosum. The only difference is that it has a higher number of villi. During months 4 and 5, what happens in the decidua is that these outgrowths develop, okay, and these are called decidual septa. So basically just think of them as lines or extensions of tissue that grow out of the decidua, and they grow specifically into the intervillous spaces, but they do not reach the chorionic plate. What these decidual septa do is that they divide the placenta into small compartments, the ones that I showed in the earlier picture, and these are called cotyledons. Okay, so this is what the placenta looks like on the decidual side. Okay, you can see here that it's clearly divided into segments, and each one of these is called a cotyledon. Okay, so if you look at this picture here, all right, you notice how there's a little okay, so just so that you guys are oriented a little bit, this is the fetal side down here where the umbilical cord is. Okay, this is the fetal side, and up here you've got the maternal side. Okay, and this is the decidua over here where the endometrium is, and you can see all the endometrial blood vessels and so forth. Okay, so notice how with from the decidua, you've got these small extensions, or these extensions coming down into the placenta, okay, but they do not reach the chorionic plate, okay. Each of these is called a decidual, or you can call it a placental septa as well. So this is one placental septum, this is another one, and this is another one here. And they grow into the intervillous spaces, like I said, and what they do is they divide the placenta into compartments, which are called cotyledons. So each of these compartments is going to have its own set of villi, and then its own set of diffusion processes happening in there. Okay, so we've seen how the placenta is connected to both the mother and the fetus, and it receives blood from both these places, so therefore it has two circulations, meaning that blood flows into circuits within the placenta. You've got something called the uteroplacental circulation, which is basically a circulation of blood between the maternal blood vessels and the placenta. Okay, and I kind of explained this a little bit the last video where I told you about the maternal blood passing into the intervillous spaces and then allowing diffusion to happen between the villi and the maternal blood. And then you've got the fetal-placental circulation, which depends on the umbilical arteries, which carry deoxygenated blood from the fetus to the placenta, and the umbilical vein, which carries oxygenated blood from the placenta to the fetus. All right, so this is just a representation of the maternal circulation, where you've got on this side here, this is the maternal blood vessel. This tree-like structure is the villus or the villi, and then anything outside the villi is the intervillous space. So you can see how the maternal blood vessels are connected to the intervillous space. So basically any blood that flows through the maternal vessels will eventually pass through here and into the intervillous space. And on the other side, you've got the blood coming from the fetus, through the umbilical artery, okay, and then into the villi, all right, so that diffusion can happen between the fetal blood and the maternal blood. Okay, and here, just to show you, now with this picture, I noticed that, I realized that as soon as you see blue, you're going to think that's the vein. Okay, remember that in pictures, the blue and red color is showing you the type of blood that is carried, not whether it's an artery or a vein. So if it's blue, that means it's carrying deoxygenated blood. And the reason for that is that we need the blood to flow under high pressure from the fetus back to the placenta so that the carbon dioxide can diffuse into the maternal blood. So the two umbilical arteries are carrying deoxygenated blood, and then the umbilical vein is carrying oxygenated blood back to the fetus. Alright, so that's all I have for you today regarding the placenta. I hope that session was useful. And I just want to share one of my favorite quotes with you today. And the reason I'm sharing this one is because I'm a huge believer of mindset and how it influences essentially everything that you do in your life. So just remember that whether you think you can do something or can't do something, you are absolutely correct. All right, so if you think that you can't do something, chances are you're probably not going to be able to do it. So you have to be in control of your mindset. You have to decide what type of person that you want to be and just live your life the way that suits you best. Alright, so thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, I hope this session was useful for you, and I will see you guys next time.